Nice to meet you, Sandy Boyer, Proclamation.
All right, it's 4:01, and I will call the meeting to order. And Mr. Shattuck, would you do the invocation, please, sir?
Sure will. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and for this gathering. We ask you that your decision, your wisdom is in the midst of this meeting and all that is decided. Be with our community this holiday season. Let us remember you are the reason for the season. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Roll call.
Trustee Edward Booth, absent. Trustee Steve Brittingham, absent. Trustee Mike Davis.
Present.
Trustee Grace Rudolph.
Here.
Trustee Jeff Shattuck.
Here.
Vice Chairman Brett Rogers.
Here.
Chairman Jeff Hammack.
Here.
Advisory Member Tammy Gwynn.
Here.
Advisory Member Thomas Newsom.
Here.
Okay, we do have a roll call. Next order of business is item 1A, consent items, is the 2023 meeting schedule.
Chairman, it does look like it says right above the chart, shows quarterly on the third Thursday of the month. I'd assume that's a carryover from a different meeting. Typically we're the second or the first Tuesday every month, and then July 5th, just from the committee's perspective, July 5th will be a Wednesday since Tuesday's the 4th, just so you guys make note of your calendars.
Absolutely, we'll make those corrections. It should say monthly on the first Tuesday of the month.
Is it intentional that that's a 5 p.m. meeting in July?
I didn't catch that. Hopefully not.
I believe that's probably,
So,
I'm making an assumption there, since I don't have this in front of me and I didn't develop this. I'm assuming that that's because we have other meetings that day, and so we would have to push the meeting so that we're not
Especially-
overlapping.
Yeah, it's after the 4th of July, then the very next day, so.
Correct.
Okay, so we will take it as presented with the corrections noted that it's monthly on the first Tuesday of the month, and not quarterly on the third Thursday. Any other comments? Any other corrections? Okay.
I make a motion that we approve the schedule with the amended monthly first Tuesday of the month, except for July, which will be that first Wednesday.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Trustee Mike Davis.
Yes.
Trustee Grace Rudolph.
Yes.
Trustee Jeff Shattuck.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Brett Rogers.
Yes.
Chairman Jeff Hammack.
Yes. Next item on the agenda is item 1B, is consider approval of November 1st, 2022 meeting minutes.
I move to approve the remaining consent items.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Mike Davis.
Yes.
Trustee Grace Rudolph.
Yes.
Trustee Jeff Shattuck.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Brett Rogers.
Yes.
Chairman Jeff Hammack.
Yes. Next order of business is item 2, consider items removed from consent. There were none. We'll move on to item number 3. Information item is 3A, is the director's report. Lisa.
So you do have my written report there. Just want to update, just touch on a couple of things there. Southwest Pickling Plant, we, the representatives from Southwest Pickling have been on the property the last couple of weeks cleaning up. They have agreed to remove all tanks, all chemicals, all debris that are on the property. We should just have a clean, building to go back to once they're off the property. And that was an agreement that was made in a meeting with representatives of Southwest Pickling as well as Department of Environmental Quality. So, Project Lift, you'll remember that's a project we've been discussing in executive session. We are having some conversations internally regarding that project, and we'll bring that hopefully back to you to review in January. Project Defense, that's the company that was interested originally in property out at the airport and has shifted to looking at the property that we own on Country Club that is located next to UPS. If you remember, there is some water on that property, but they're only interested in the front portion of it. And we had no new applicants so far for small business grants that have all of their items in with their application. So there should be applications next month on the agenda for you all to review. I will say that a majority of grantees have been paid to this point, and I'm looking at Tammy, did we get all of them paid now? They only have one that has left to pick up their check, but all grant documents have been signed, checks have been issued, and grantees are required to submit receipts. Those have already started coming in for the first round of grantees. And we have hired as you all know, we have hired a new economic development director who will serve as the executive director of the Durant Industrial Authority. And I'll welcome, if you don't have anything for me, I'll welcome her up here to
Yes, please.
say hi.
Real quick on the pickling plant, do we have a timing of when that property will be delivered back to us in a good condition?
Yeah, so I believe originally we had given them 90 days. There was some issue getting the roll-off out there and all of that. So hope to have that within the next couple of months, have that completed. But they have been really diligent in getting a crew out there and cleaning up. So, okay.
Hello, Nicole Tucker. Very nice to meet you. I've had the privilege of meeting some of you individually. I look forward to being able to have conversations with all of you when your schedules permit. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any questions for her right now? Put her on the hot spot or anything?
What's your plan? The pickling plant when we get back in 90 days.
Thank you. It's good to have you. We look
Nice to
forward
meet
to
you.
a good long relationship.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is 3A, or excuse me, correction, that's 3B, is the financial report. Treasurer Shattuck, if you would share that with us, please.
Okay, looking down through here, we briefly said a few things before the meeting started, but it looks really good. If you look at page 13, it shows the 110 account, your assets and liabilities based on what the city shows. Look really good right now. Cash and pooled or claim on pooled cash 2.836 million. Due from DIA 2.85 million. It shows our revenue and expenses down there below that. Revenue for the year 444,000. Expenses 30,341. If you go back the page before that, page 12, you'll see what the city shows that we have. Our balance sheet as far as so thus far up until this point in the year, total assets 8,783,000. You can see down below there revenue of 301,113.11, expenses of 425,516.92, with a negative 124,403. That's not unusual, I think, at this time of the year. So, if you go to page. Next thing I want to show you is page 17. You'll see the First United account, end of October, 506,145.49 is our balance. So we're fine there. The next page, page 18, shows our expenses in that account for the month of October. Nothing unusual there. That's pretty well it. If you go to page 21. It shows cash balances in Fund 110 and Fund 020. Shows our revenue and expenses for both. This year we're doing very well, I think. So that's pretty much it for this month. Pretty quiet.
Any questions? Okay, if there are none, we will move to item 3C is the 404 permit process update.
So a quick reminder to you all, we've hired Mead Hunt to conduct the activities for the 404 permit to mitigate water off of the property that we own in the West Industrial Park that's next door to Cardinal Glass. There's a little more than 40 acres there, and if you remember, there was a pond, a small pond in the middle of that property. Our city engineer, Brandon Wall, had discovered the water being part of Blue Line Stream during his investigation into something else in the area. This water on the property ultimately was the one thing that lost Project Bison for us. We were a contender until they visited, found out that the water, we had to go through this long process to mitigate the water off of the property. So we've invited Kim Shannon from Mead Hunt and Brandon Wall from Wall Engineering to come in and talk about where we are in that mitigation process.
Good afternoon. Kim Shannon. I'm here from Mead Hunt, our Tulsa office. And so early on, my introduction to this site from Lisa and Brandon was with regard to the Project Bison site. And when they realized that there was some complex water issues there, a combination, I've given you all, I think, have a copy of kind of the list of items that I'm going to try to address here, and then 2 or 3 different site layouts, graphics of the area that include Brandon's engineering plan of the site for potential development. And there's also one with a colorful map here with the waters that were found on the site that we delineated. And then the other one, the third one, is Site 2, that at one point in time we had been discussing with regard to potentially another project there, and it was very much put on the back burner. So my concerns here and what we were brought in to do was to investigate the site and to delineate the streams and the wetlands. So this consists of figuring out exactly where the boundaries of the streams are based on what we refer to as the ordinary high water mark, where water comes up and down within a bed in a bank to map the extent, the width basically of that water body, of that stream. So when it's flowing on a regular basis, not an everyday basis, but an average kind of high water level that takes into everything takes into takes in everything from low water levels during the heat of the summer to higher water levels after good spring rains. So that's what the yellow line is referring to here on the one map. That is the width of the intermittent stream, and on a topographic map, this is a dashed and dotted blue line stream, and I believe that's what got Brandon's attention when he started reviewing this site. So the stream flows from that northwest portion of the site down towards the southeast edge. And as it flows from west to east, basically, it is creating and going through a small green wetland, and then picks up bed and bank again as the yellow curved line. There is lots of disturbance around the pond, and you can see where that yellow line drops off before it connects to the pond. I believe that something that went hand in hand with vegetation removal along Highway 70 here at the southern end of the property. It seems like, based on my time out there in June, that not only was vegetation disturbed there's a lot of disturbance around the pond also. There's a lot of dirt that was overturned and trees down, and maybe trees pushed to that place to get them away from the road. Anyway, so the bed and the bank wasn't nicely defined all the way to that kind of northern end of the pond. We have the large body of water there, that's the pond, and then what I refer to as a fringe wetland that pretty much goes all the way around it, except on the one portion where is the actual impoundment structure, the dam that's on that kind of southeastern corner of the pond. That yellow blue line stream picks back up as it heads off the property and keeps flowing east till it gets to Mineral Bayou Creek. And in the meantime, there's a purple line that intersects the yellow. That is an ephemeral stream, water flowing through it less often, but still signs that I pick up on with the movement of water, leaves and racking of materials that allow me to figure out where the boundary of that ephemeral stream would be that feeds into the yellow. So all the water's trying to move off to that southeastern corner of the site, except for what's been impounded here in the pond and in the wetlands. So if you compare that map with, the plans for the site, everything basically sits right on top of those water bodies. And as part of my conversation with the Corps of Engineers, we haven't started anything formal with regard to this project, but I have discussed it with them to make sure that my thoughts are in line with exactly what they would expect to see when it comes to 404 permitting for this site. And basically anywhere where we have, whether it's the building, the parking lot, and even the two ponds shown there to detain water, wherever they come in contact with one of these mapped and delineated water bodies, we have impacts. And those impacts have to be calculated based both on length for the streams and area more specifically for the ponds and the wetlands. So mitigating for these impacts to these water bodies is the first thing that the Corps of Engineers is going to want addressed as part of the 404 permitting process. And mitigating for these impacts, over the last 10 plus years, the Tulsa District, the Corps of Engineers has wetland mitigation sites and stream mitigation sites over most of the state. But unfortunately, this part of southern Oklahoma is mitigation bankless, pretty much. So the responsibility to alleviate and to pay for these impacts basically falls on the permittee as being responsible for that. And in this type of situation, because we don't have a bank or an in lieu fee mitigation site where you could pay a fee up front, knowing that whoever owns the property would go ahead and mitigate for it, you're looking at either using a piece of property that you already have or purchasing property to mitigate for these impacts. And these impacts, while you can see on the map, I've got the amount of linear feet and the acreage for the wetlands. The Corps of Engineers has very specific guidelines and forms that help me calculate what the mitigation ratios are going to be. They take into consider the ecological significance of these water bodies, what watershed they're in, all kinds of different things. And you've got lots of things that go into these factors that help derive mitigation ratios. And from the early paperwork that I've done so far, just for the yellow intermittent stream alone, the mitigation ratio is going to start at about 3-to-1. So intermittent 1 shows it being 1,369 linear feet. You're looking at a little over a mile, like 1.2 miles worth of stream potentially to mitigate for the impacts just to that one yellow intermittent stream. So now the hardest part of this process is finding somewhere that has a stretch of, almost 6,000 linear feet of stream where you can mitigate for your impacts. And that's just the first water body. So this becomes a very expensive and lengthy proposition. And while the 404 permit is not that difficult to get, there's a beautiful list of everything that has to be met, reports that I prepare on your behalf, on the city's behalf, to give to them to say, here's what we're planning. Everything is contingent upon finding somewhere to mitigate for these impacts. They will not grant the 404 permit until we have a secured site to mitigate for all of these impacts, acreages, and linear feet. So, originally, when I was thinking about this, and I knew that the other little site off Country Club was there, because the first site here with these large water bodies is so close to Mineral Bayou Creek, this is actually a potentially very good mitigation site because it's got a lot of upstream benefits that would feed down into Mineral Bayou Creek. You clean this site up, everything downstream of it is in that much better shape also. I don't know if that's a possibility. I haven't been, I don't know what's up to date with that other particular site. That's what that Site 2 map is. Yes, there is a little bitty stream there, but if a site that was originally planned for what I'm referring to as Site 1 shifted to Site 2, and we could use Site 1 to mitigate for its impacts and potentially other impacts that the city might have for other projects, you've got your own little bank here potentially. So it's a long process to be able to build on this site based on all of the water bodies that are here, and finding an appropriate site to mitigate for those impacts. And that is all also dependent upon the Corps' approval of the site. Typically in a mitigation plan, I would offer them a couple of different prospects, whether sometimes you can find a landowner in the area, maybe there's a large rancher or somebody who has lots of stream frontage that they'd be willing to let you mitigate on their site, but then it still has to be potentially enhanced or restored if there's a lot of invasive plants or erosion. Everything needs to be restored to the Corps' liking. That's part of the big mitigation plan that I would prepare. And then there's also, at least depending on their preferences, usually starts at about a 5-year monitoring period, potentially up to 10 years worth of monitoring at this mitigation site and long-term maintenance of the site. So.
And is that before we proceed to the next step? Like we have a 5 or 10 year period of?
No. Once, if I were to turn into the Corps of Engineers a 404 permit that had a mitigation plan that they'd had a chance to review and okay, they would grant you that 404 permit, and then everything would start happening, parallel to each other. Construction at the site, figuring out exactly how to enhance or restore something at the mitigation site, who could do that, and then a year after things have been implemented, the monitoring would start and report an annual report back to the Corps of Engineers for that. I'll look at my little list here real quick. That's kind of the basics of, I think, what you guys need to know about this particular site and its significance with regard to water bodies. The initial conversation that I had with a regulator there at the Corps of Engineers, he had this map. I emailed it to him, and then we followed up with a phone call. And based on how they determine what is jurisdictional, I don't, in my report to them, I offer what I believe would be jurisdictional based on their guidelines, and everything that's on this map here in front of you, they would take as jurisdictional. There is another step in the process that some people like to have in their back pocket, but it's almost a bit of a kind of a double dip. When I submit a 404 permit application with the delineation report and a mitigation plan, we getting concurrence from the Corps that, yes, these are jurisdictional water bodies. You can also seek a jurisdictional determination from the Corps that basically all it says is that the delineation report that I prepared for you all would go into the Corps with another form, and they would come back and say, yes, those are jurisdictional, but we really haven't gained anything as far as moving forward with the 404 permitting process. In my eyes, with the Tulsa district, I've always just submitted the 404 permit, and you just automatically assume that you have their concurrence and it even says in the formal, language of the 404 permit that you have their concurrence that what they're looking at is jurisdictional. Whether it's a jurisdictional determination or the delineation report, there is a shelf life for these things of typically about 5 years, because every 5 years the Corps of Engineers and the EPA update their permitting, their list of permits, standard permits, and some of them, unfortunately, those permits that get updated every 5 years are for lower impact projects than this. This would go under an individual permit where everything is reviewed not only by the Corps of Engineers, but it also gets reviewed by the EPA, and we have a public comment option for a month that all of this information gets posted on the Corps of Engineers website, and different state and federal agencies then and tribes comment on the project too, or they just say we have no comment and we move forward. The other thing that was reviewed at the site, I didn't provide a map for it, but it always goes hand in hand with the federal process like this. There is a nexus that brings in the Fish and Wildlife Service to review for potential threatened and endangered species at the site. There wasn't anything to worry about there. The only thing that there was habitat there for is a candidate species that just happened within 2022. The monarch butterfly is listed as a candidate species. So it doesn't carry any true weight with regard to protection, but one of the maps that's in the delineation report shows that there's a lot of habitat there. So I don't think that would be an issue at all for this, unless the status of the monarch butterfly changes. If it becomes endangered or threatened first, then you could have another rounds of mitigation perhaps. What kind of questions?
A lot of information. I have a few myself.
Sure.
As it stands right now, where all the ephemeral and the pond feature and the intermittent, nothing can be built over that. But can you, let's say we have the northeast section and the southwest section, can those be sold as is without having to do anything with the water issues?
Yes.
Essentially, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Do we?
Sure.
Because you said it's going to be a time-consuming and a costly endeavor for this 404 permit.
Absolutely.
And can you just give us a ballpark figure on the cost? Just a rough estimate.
From a timeline perspective, between the 404 permit and getting the mitigation information all wrapped up, a typical individual permit 404, you're looking at 9 months to a year. And if I were turned loose and said, okay, let's start looking for a piece of property to mitigate for these at the beginnings of 3-to-1 ratios, I mean, you're looking at hundreds of thousands, maybe potentially close to $1 million to secure a site and undertake even a small amount of restoration or enhancement to the water bodies. That's a huge ballpark figure, and a lot of leeway. There are lots of ways to get around that when it comes to finding partners that might be willing to work with you. Every once in a while, there have been times when we've been able to work with ODWC if there's, like a public hunting area or some other sort of public property within the Mineral Creek Bio-Huck, the hydrologic unit that this falls into. Everything centers on trying to mitigate for these impacts as close to where they're happening as possible. So let's say there's a public hunting area within 10 miles and it's within this same Mineral Bayou Huck. We could potentially look at discussing things with ODWC. It's been done multiple times. I've worked with the Nature Conservancy on different mitigation projects. You can find partners. It's just a matter of time. But it can be done. You don't have to necessarily buy a big piece of property outright.
So in lieu of buying property, find partners to help with the mitigation, but that has to be a part of the 404 permitting.
Right.
That part of it'd be included in the permit.
Right.
And it could take a little bit longer time to find those partners, depending on the situation, those type of things.
Exactly.
So upwards, and naturally it could be more or less, but we're looking close to $1 million.
Potentially.
Potentially on this project. Or if we do nothing, then all we have is basically what I'm seeing is 2 tracts of land that you could sell as long as they don't impact the waterways that are, the water issues that are on the property.
Correct. And if for some reason you found an industrial partner or somebody who wanted to develop the site and you could put the majority of a building on this northeastern portion of the property and put a bridge over the intermittent stream and, put parking down below and, make it a nice, natural area for the employees. If you could figure out how to use the site with very minimally impacting it, you could get things done within 6 months. And let's say you had to impact 300 linear feet of that stream in order to put a box culvert in and to build a little bridge over it for transportation of whether it's large vehicles or everyday, vehicles that we drive. You can mitigate for those impacts right there on the same site. It could be done depending on how you guys want to use this. There's lots of options. I know I mentioned it in the handout and I haven't said anything outright about it. One of the other first things that the Corps wants is to see how you have minimized and avoided impacts. So right now, if I turned in a 404 permit with this drawing today saying, here's what wants to happen, I would come up with and, have you all approve, this site needs to be used this way due to, heavy truck movement. We would find ways to justify this. They would still let you build it if there's no way to avoid or minimize, but then you've got a lot of mitigating to do. So if there is a way to avoid and minimize, this site is definitely usable. That's where branding comes into play.
Any other questions concerning this topic? Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you all.
Brandon, you want to be next? See if you can follow that.
Thank you. I don't know that I have much to add to that. I think that the thing that's probably on kind of the decision plate of the authority right now is what you want to do with the property. You do have the other piece of property out on Country Club that has the same problem. So you could use this property to make the Country Club property fully developable. You could, as the chairman suggested, you could break this one up into 2 separate tracks, mitigate on site. You could access the back track with a bridge and mitigate for the stream through the middle. I think it's just mostly a decision of what the authority wants to do at this point. If you are serious about this property and want to move forward, I think a good first place to look for possible or potential mitigation sites would be city-owned property. Is there, what's at the sports complex? Is there blue line stream on the back side of the sports complex? Is there another public partner in the area that has blue line stream? I'm thinking about like maybe the university's property there where the where the trail is, there where they're building the new equestrian center, some of those types of things. Could you work with a community partner to gain some stream to mitigate around town? But I think ultimately question number one is what do you want to do with the property? Do you want to look at a smaller development on the front, potentially on the back, or do you want to use that as a mitigation site, try to find additional mitigation sites? I think you're kind of just at a decision point, because the problem is when you have somebody that comes up and says we want the whole site and you still haven't mitigated it, you have to tell them, well, we're still a year away. So the site's kind of useless at that point in terms of the whole site. So if you want to use the whole site, there's a path forward. You want to use the site in two pieces, you could still use the site, you could use the front part of the site as one piece and mitigate that central part of the stream and kind of have that in your pocket on other industrial sites that you wanted to use. Kind of have that in your hip pocket to be able to mitigate other sites like the country club site. So I think that's kind of where we are at this point. Kim and Mead Hunt have done their research and kind of given you the information. It's kind of up to the authority as to how you want to proceed at this point.
Do have a question just to clarify. You said, or Kim, you may have said this, that if we do something with this track on Highway 70, it would help the site too on mitigation. Did I misunderstand that, or?
So Site 2 has a blue line stream on it as well. That
Right,
site has a blue
right.
line stream on it as well. So you would be required to have mitigation on that site as well. So you're going to get the same issue, but you could use the site, the Cardinal site, you could use that as mitigation for the Country Club Road site.
Okay.
You would still end up with the piece out front that you could use and develop, sell, whatever you want to do with it. You would use the stream as mitigation, and you could use that mitigation credit to release the site over on Country Club. Which to me sounds like a pretty good option, to be able to at least make one larger tract out of it, because you're not going to get very many people that want a tract as small as that little piece on the front.
I agree. I just want to make sure regarding that. Do any of the trustees have questions for?
If we do proceed with Site 2 and use Site 1 as in mitigating, is that big enough? Is it enough to handle all of what we need to do for Site 2 to be completed with no other properties involved, or is that?
Kim, is there enough on Site 1?
I believe, yes, that there would be, mainly because you have multiple water bodies at Site 1. I believe the linear feet at Site 2 was, what, in the 1,300 range? 1537?
1537.
Okay, with the one major and then the one little tributary there to it. So while typically you would want to mitigate like for like, intermittent stream for intermittent stream, the fact that Site 1 has other options, it's got the ephemeral, we could very much negotiate with the Corps and say, okay, maybe there's not an exact amount of intermittent stream length that we need, but there are other options at Site 1 to take care of any impacts at Site 2. So we could use not only the intermittent stream, but we could use the ephemeral and say, hey, and by the way, while we're doing this wetland's going to be enhanced too, and we believe you should let us use that as a credit for the mitigation towards the impacts for Site 2. They will go out of kind, so to speak. You just got to give them all the right options they want to hear.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Lisa.
So I placed this on the agenda on information only. I wanted everyone to have opportunity to kind of digest the information, do your own research. Also want to remind you that we opted not to start the mitigation or the 404 permit process or exploration on Site 2, just because we've got some people kind of interested in the property. I think that mitigation off of Site 2 onto Site 1 probably would be feasible, but also dangling out there is that we are looking for other opportunities for property to mitigate to within the city of Durant. We have some property down on 9th that we've mitigated to in the past. Not sure if there's anything available there at this time. Going to check into that. Also, the city, had bought the old golf course some time back. There's a low part on there. Not sure that maybe there might be opportunity for that as well. So we want to kind of take some time and look at all of that, all of those options, to move forward and mitigate off of Site 2 onto Site 1. That probably will take the action of the Durant Industrial Authority to approve that, to spend the tax dollars on it, and then also City Council to approve that as well. So just wanted to give you all time again to, let's look at all the options. We have the information, and then come back later and ask for an action by DIA. Do y'all have any questions for me at this time?
Thoughts, comments?
Just a recap. So Country Club is about 20 acres, 21?
21 acres, yep.
And then this Site
is
160?
No, this is about 41 acres, I believe. Depends which, you look at the county treasurers and it's one number, and you look at the Google Earth and its number. It's either 41 acres or 47 acres, depending which of those that you look at. I believe the assessor's office says it's 47 acres. So.
And does the DIA have any other land that's got Class 1 rail besides this? Because wouldn't that make it more valuable on Site 1?
Yeah, Site 1 would be more valuable for the rail, but that's also assuming that you could fit the rail in there. Depends what type of project that it would be, to get a spur out through there. So. There is some property out by the airport that would have opportunity for that, and it is for sale now, by the way. So.
Just to speak to Tammy's point, we did look at the rail on the Cardinal site, and you can just barely get a spur in there. So there is room for a spur on that site, but you'd have to mitigate the entire site because it cuts right through the middle and runs down the opposite edge. But there is room for a spur on that site. So definitely that side would be more valuable with the rail spur there.
And we do, if you look at that map of the Site 1, if you look at the west side of that property, you see Cardinal Parkway, which is a city street. It's an industrial street. When I originally visited that site, I thought that there would be opportunity to enter the site from the back side or from the north side at some point from Cardinal Parkway. But if you look at your map, you'll see a gas pad on there. So and then there's like a berm. So it would be difficult because of the water. And I don't know that we could move the water. I mean, that would be part of that process as well, to be able to drive through there. So.
Regarding the spur, would that be could that be included in the 404 permit as far as a potential, or that would have nothing to do with that? That'd be just between the DIA and
the rail company.
The railroad. So that wouldn't need to be a part of it, and saying, hey, this is what could happen if we do the cleanup and permitting and mitigation. So, okay.
So, yeah, the working with the rail would be separate.
Separate from the permit, okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Probably need to move forward one way or the other on this.
Well, I'll come back. I'll be in touch, or Nicole. We'll all be in touch throughout the next month, and hope to bring back a proposal for DIA action next month. Make a decision on it. That'll give us time. Tammy and I had a brief conversation. We're going to look at some property on 9th Street that we've mitigated to in the past, and we'll see if there's any opportunity there.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank both of you also for sharing your information with us. Next item on the agenda is item 4 is administration. Nothing on administration today, so the next item is item 5 is new business. Any trustees, anyone have new business to discuss today? Anything? Okay. If there are none, we need, next item be a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Mike Davis,
Yes.
Trustee Grace Rudolph,
Yes.
Trustee Jeff Shattuck,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Brett Rogers,
Yes.
Chairman Jeff Hammack.
Yes. We are adjourned. Thank you.